Lieutenant William de Passy, adjutant of the 2nd South Australian Mounted Rifles, described the role of his unit and an interesting meeting with Colonel Tom Price. Quote, "Just west of the town is Dingaan's monument, erected long ago to celebrate a victory gained by the Boers over the Zulus, and it was here that they made their stand and entrenched after being driven out of the hills around Diamond Hill. At the back of the monument and behind the town there was a deep donga in which the main body of the Boers was sheltering with their heavy guns dug in and concealed on the hills in the rear of the donga, that is, north of the monument. This, in conjunction with the trenches they had dug, the stoneworks they had erected, the railway embankment on the east, and an almost impossible swamp further west, made a very strong position for defence. We were advancing from the south and Buller from the southeast, and the South Australians were the advanced scouts. On the 21st of August, the day we sighted Belfast, we were saluted by a shower of shrapnel from some guns north of Belfast. We had converged into a narrow front to avoid the railway to our right and an unfordable swamp on our left. This swamp was about 1.5 miles long and 750 yards across, and one troop had gone on the outer side of the swamp, keeping in line with us. This was on our left. On the right of the railway, the country was covered by Buller's scouts. As soon as we were fired on, we took cover, and it was nearly at sundown, and we could see the enemy's advanced scouts moving in small groups between us and Belfast. We bivouacked for the night with our transport below the crest of the hills in rear of our position. I placed 2 Cossack posts 100 yards in front and between the swamp and railway, and sent word to the troop across the swamps to stay there and bivouac as a flank post till morning, and then we made ourselves as comfortable as we could for the night. It was a wet, cold, sleety night. The farmhouse was deserted, and the only fuel available for cooking and boiling our billies was the furniture, window frames, doors and floors of the farm. It was soon dismantled, and our fires going in a circular cattle kraal with high stone walls as a protection from the wind. We managed to get an issue of rum into the coffee. I did not occupy the farmhouse as it was a prominent object for shell fire, but we camped our men who were not on outposts in the cattle kraal, which gave us shelter and allowed us to keep our horses with us under cover with shelter from the wind during the night and possible shrapnel fire in the morning. We were just getting comfortable, and it was nearly dark when I heard a commotion in our rear and knew from the sounds that a mounted force had arrived. Our CO was curled up under a kraal wall asleep, and I was nearly in the same state and did not wish to be disturbed when I heard a voice I knew say, "Where the bloody hell are we, Bruce?" I went out of the kraal and saw that it was Colonel Tom Price and the Victorian Mounted Rifles, who had been in reserve to us in advance of the infantry column that day. I explained to him what the position was and said we had not occupied the house but had left it for any senior officer who may come up, and he decided to camp in it with his staff. He took possession, grumbling all the time at the damage that we'd done to it. I told him that all was secure, but he was not satisfied and told his adjutant, Colonel Bruce, to post 3 Cossack points in front of his quarters. As I've previously said, it was extremely cold, so I asked him if he would like some hot coffee and rum before retiring for the night. He had thought I was taking a rise out of him and said so in language more profane than polite. But I called our quartermaster sergeant and told him to bring over a small dixie of hot coffee, well laced with rum, for Colonel Price. The colonel was astonished to hear the order, and when the rum and coffee came was very grateful to me for it, as neither he nor his men had an issue of rum since Diamond Hill. The colonel then retired to his room at the farmhouse, and after he had gone, the adjutant asked me where he should post the 3 Cossack points who by this time were waiting to be posted. I said, "Don't disturb the front line. If your CO wants to sleep secure, post them round the house. They are not required anywhere else." He posted them close round the house in which the CO had retired. At daybreak next morning I went over to the adjutant to show him the different points of the position, as it was dark when he arrived the previous evening, and Colonel Tom Price came out of the door of the house to have a look around. Noticing the Cossack posts and looking at them for a moment or two, he roared out, "Bruce, what the hell are those men posted here for?" Bruce answered. Sir, you ordered 3 Cossack posts to be posted, and as there are no room for them in the front line, I posted them here. The colonel said, And so I slept under guard like a prisoner, did I? Dismiss them. Turning to me, he said, Where can I get some more of that excellent coffee? I sent for some, and afterwards things went all right. As previously mentioned, we had a troop over the far side of the swamp. This swamp was about 750 yards wide, and a wire fence ran across it from our side to near where they were on their side. At daylight, I signalled for them to come in. They had sent their horses to us for safety the night before, and as it was about 1.5 miles round the end of the swamp, they decided to cross over on the wire of the fence as the nearest way. When they were about halfway across, the enemy's guns began to drop shell around the men crossing on the wire. The shells were landing in the water and mud of the swamp. It was amusing to watch us striking the water and not the men crossing. If a shell had cut the wire, they would have been in a nice plight, as the swamp was deep and sticky in places. However, they got over all right, safe and dry-footed. The position we were holding was on high ground. It was from here we had a good view of the battlefield. The monument commemorates the defence of Mafeking by Baden-Powell, Lord Cecil and the garrison during the South African Boer War. The Siege of Mafeking was the most famous British action in the Second Boer War. It took place at the town of Mahikeng, called Mafeking by the British, in South Africa over a period of 217 days from October 1899 to May 1900. And turned Robert Baden-Powell, who went on to found the Scouting movement, into a national hero. The relief of Mafeking, the lifting of the siege, was a decisive victory for the British and a crushing defeat for the Boers. Here's from the Advertiser, Adelaide, 18th of January 1901, quote, Last year it was suggested that the defence of Mafeking should be commemorated here in a permanent form, and subsequently it was decided to erect a monument close to the public school buildings on a reserve. On a mound in the open space there are 3 square blocks of stonework neatly cut, carrying an obelisk which rises some distance from the ground. On a tablet on one side are the words, Erected by Murray Bridge admirers in recognition of the heroic defence of Mafeking by Colonel Baden-Powell, Lord Cecil, and the garrison from November the 17th, 1899 to May the 27th, 1900. This monument, besides being an evidence of loyalty, is also by its chaste design and ornament into the town, and is noteworthy as being the first instance of any incident of the war being commemorated in stone, at least in South Australia. The design was executed by Mr. S.J. Williams. The stone cutting was done by Mr. Edward McNell, both of this town, and the monument and the stone came from local quarries. The ceremony of unveiling the monument took place on Wednesday. There was a large attendance of townspeople and district residents, including most of the children in the neighbourhood. Captain Ham's account of the Victorian Bushmen at Renostakop. The Argus, 10th of January 1901, quote, We marched through Pretoria at the head of the column, with General Paget leading. This was a great honour for the 3rd Regiment. We camped at Eerste Fabrieken for a couple of days, and I and my squadron were sent out for forage. I took Lieutenants Moore and Lieutenant Gartside with me. Our mission was to gather fodder and to get in touch with the enemy. After getting away about 6 miles from camp, I got information that there was a laager of the enemy about 4 miles on. I decided to take Gartside and to do some reconnoitring. We, however, soon found out that it would be very dangerous to go any further with such a small number as I had with me, and we returned to camp and reported. Next day our regiment was sent out, and by some good movements we drove the enemy before us. We occupied their position and had some good rifle practice as the Boers galloped away on the other side of the koppies which we had taken. Next day the whole force moved, and we were the advance party once more. We were soon made aware of the presence of the Boers when they fired from some native kraals at the foot of a range. None of our men were hurt. We had a good fight with them here and drove them out of their positions with our guns and pom-poms, and we camped that night on their ground, close to several Dutch farms. Our doctors attended to a few of their wounded, and 3 of them were killed by members of my squadron, as they were found in the places we had fired at. On the following day we had the left flank of the advance guard, but we only saw small parties of Boers that day. I had to find pickets at night and to post them on the plain or open veldt. It rained in torrents. We all had a most miserable night, wet and soaked, and next morning we moved off at daylight once more as the advanced party. This continually being the advanced party is a great honour to our regiment, which consists of Victorians, Tasmanians and West Australians. It's caused a bit of jealousy, but although it is a great honour to be always in the front, it's also the most dangerous place, and our fellows would just as well have a spell as rear guard, as our horses would get easier work, and they want it badly. So do the men. The wetting I got last night started my rheumatism, and I could hardly sit in the saddle, but I wanted to be in the fun. As advance party we soon ran against the enemy and dismounted and engaged them, but they did not stay long, seeking shelter on some rocky koppies to the left and galloping away in front. Our pom-poms rattled it round them as they went. I was ordered to take the stony koppie on the left and change direction accordingly. As we approached to within 800 yards, I fully expected to feel their fire, but on we still went until our pace increased to a run, and as soon as we were on the top, I had to lag behind as the pain in one of my legs was great, and I could not climb as actively as I wanted to. When we reached the top, about 200 Boers were at the bottom of the other side and were evidently moving up to get shelter of the rocks. The rapidity of our movement and a few shots among them completely nonplussed them, and instead of getting the koppies, they found we had got there before them. They galloped off in all directions with our bullets emptying their saddles and spitting up the dust amongst them. We had some more good practice. We held this position all day and could see several commandos joining in the distance, all of them moving to the east. On our return to camp, the commanding officer called me up and congratulated me, the squadron, on the work it had done during the day. This was very satisfactory to me, because the commanding officer is very sparing in his praise. We were all very tired that night. Strong and Moore did good service during the day. It commenced raining again that night, and orders came that we were to make a general attack on the enemy's position at 2:30 next morning. We had no idea that the position which the enemy had occupied was so strong. We were all busy at the appointed time, and soon after daylight we had a fighting line fully 4 miles long. The Munster Fusiliers attacked towards the centre, the New Zealanders and the 4th Queenslanders on the either side of them, the Imperial Yeomanry on the extreme right, with a small body of South Australian Bushmen as their support. To the left we had the New South Wales Bushmen and the Queensland Bushmen, and the West Australian and Victorian Bushmen on the extreme left flank. The Victorians and West Australians were the first to get in contact with the enemy, who met our advance with a hot fire from behind some rocks. Here my orderly, McCurdy, was struck in the back of the head as I gave the order, "Falls right!" He had just turned when the bullet struck him on the side of the head behind his ear, going right through. Gartside supported him until we got him into a dip between the rises, where we dismounted. McCurdy said as he was hit, "Another of Captain Ham's orderlies is wiped out." It seems a fate indeed, for this is the 7th orderly I've lost, and the superstition is so great now that I cannot get a man to take the position. My last orderly died of enteric fever. But, to continue the narrative, after we had dismounted we proceeded to attack the position on the enemy's right, and recarried it without having a shot fired at us. I gave order to True and his men to hold this, and Gartside and Strong's men came forward with me. Major Vials and the West Australians were on our left. Hill and his men were in our rear and came on as our support. As we approached 4 strong koppies and within 600 yards of them, one of my men saw a Boer in the distance and fired at him. Immediately there came a hellish fire from these koppies from the enemy, and I ordered the men about me to take cover. It was not necessary for me to give such an order, as each man and I instinctively fell flat on the ground. Here we were without any more cover than afforded by the short felt grass. To go forward meant the loss of many men, and to go backward meant the same, so here we stuck, with the bullets spitting dust all around us, and every now and then the pom-pom of the enemy searched our line from end to end. The South African Boer War Memorial in Adelaide. The bronze equestrian statue commemorates soldiers who served in the South Australian contingents in the South African Boer War, and also those from South Australia who died in service or were killed in action during the conflict. The monument serves as a reminder of South Australia's Boer War involvement and of colonial support for Britain during the war. The equestrian statue cost £1,600, which was raised by public subscription in South Australia. The statue is of a trooper in uniform, believed to be George Henry Goodall, a farrier sergeant in the 2nd South Australian contingent, and is cast in bronze and set on a pedestal of red Murray Bridge granite. The names of 59 officers and men killed in the conflict are inscribed on bronze shields. This is a quote from the Zeehan and Dundas Herald, dated the 7th of June 1904. Quote, Captain Adrian Jones's bronze equestrian statue, which is intended to commemorate the part which South Australians played in the South African War and will be erected near the entrance to the Government House at Adelaide, has been shipped by Lund's Blue Anchor liner Wakul. Sir George LaHunt, Governor of South Australia, performed with due ceremony on the 6th of June 1904 the unveiling of an equestrian statue in bronze raised to the memory of South Australians who fell during the South African War. There was a large and distinguished attendance, and the statue, which was executed by Mr. Adrian Hope, was much admired as a noble work. The cost was over £2,000, raised by public subscription.
Britons always loyally declaim about the way we rule the waves. Every Briton's song is just the same when singing of her soldiers brave. All the world that's heard it wonders why we sing. Some have learned the reason why. We're not forgetting it, we're not letting it fade away or gradually die. Fade away or gradually die. So when we say that England's master, remember who has made her so. It's the soldiers of the Queen, my lads, who've been, my lads, who've seen, my lads, in the fight for England's glory, lads, of its worldwide glory, let us sing. And when we say we've always won, and when they ask us how it's done, we'll proudly point to every one of England's soldiers